honor to rise in this House, and I suspect that the members opposite knew I had the first late show this evening, and that's why so many of them are still here, which we're not used to seeing in adjournment proceedings. But I'm very grateful for this. And, you know, I note that this question that I'm asking the government comes on the heels of this House's passage of what I will say is a very dangerous budget for Canada and for Canadians, a budget that cements a $78 billion deficit, a budget that signs Canada up to $321 billion more in new debt over the coming years, a budget that will allow for $55 billion to be spent this year on debt interest alone. Now, Mr. Speaker, that is more than this government spends on health transfers to provinces. That is more than this government spends on the child tax incentives. That is more than Canada collects in GST. When I bring that up, it's to say that these numbers have meaning. Canada's fiscal situation is dire after 10 years of mismanagement by the Liberal government. And this is something that we have heard warnings of. This is the fastest shrinking economy in the G7. The deficit of $78 billion is one that the Liberal government, the Prime Minister, said would not exist because he promised a deficit of no more than $62 billion. Now, the reason this is so important, Mr. Speaker, is because Canadians could not afford to run their own household budgets the way this government is running Canada's budget. In fact, I don't think the Prime Minister would have had the deal he did at Brookfield if he ran Brookfield the way he is now running Canada and Canada's books. So where is the master banker we are promised? Where is the master financier, the guy who could move at the speed of crisis? Where is that Prime Minister? Now, the question that I asked in this House a few weeks ago and on which I rise again today had to do with the auto sector specifically. My riding of Elgin St. Thomas, London South, has a great many employees that were affected by a number of plant closures over recent weeks. From CAMI in the neighboring riding of Oxford and some of the subsidiaries, or the vendors rather, suppliers to CAMI around the region, including in my riding, where hundreds and hundreds of workers, well over 1,200 workers, have been directly put at economic risk. Their livelihoods terminated because of this government's failure to fulfill a promise that it made, a key promise by the Prime Minister to stand up for the auto sector. Now, there has been, from the Liberal government, a fair bit in the way of revisionism when called on what the Prime Minister said, which is that he would get a deal with the United States, a deal with Donald Trump by July. They've said, no, he didn't really mean it. He meant that he would work towards it, that wasn't really a deadline, it was a guideline. Well, for Canadians who put their trust in this Prime Minister to secure an economic future for this country, that is a broken promise. And in this budget, we do not have anything resembling a plan that will protect auto workers, that will protect manufacturing jobs in my region and across the country. This is a budget that will only put Canadians at risk of having to spend more in debt interest, having to deal with more inflation because of runaway debt and deficit spending, and no plan to secure our jobs and secure an economic future for our country. So will this Prime Minister say once and for all that they have a plan to protect the auto sector and reveal what it is?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, the Minister of Industry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the intervention from my colleague from Elgin St. Thomas, London South, on the budget and on the auto sector in particular. I think we're in the aftermath of quite a historic moment in this House, where the main budget motion has passed, a budget that brings forward an investment plan focusing on investment in housing, investments in infrastructure, investments in defence, investments in talent, and investments in productivity. But investments that are really about triggering and unleashing private sector investment. We predict that this budget will bring forward $500 billion in additional private sector investment to this country over the next 5 years. And that's really private sector investment that we welcome throughout the different regions of this country. And I'll give maybe some examples in the auto sector. particularly in St. Thomas, the honourable member would be aware of the new gigafactory, which has broken down ground there now. 3,000 direct jobs, 32,000 square meters of concrete, 4,850 metric tons of rebar, a significant plant that will bring thousands of jobs to his riding. And as the honourable member is well aware, when you bring direct jobs into the auto sector, there's all kinds of spin-off, indirect and induced jobs. And I'll just quote, as the honourable member would know well, the mayor of St. Thomas, and he was quoted saying a few weeks ago, "The mayor hasn't stopped smiling since," and he's referring to himself here, "generations in the future can still have a job that pays well enough to buy a home in St. Thomas and become part of a really vibrant community." And so that's some of the positive investment that comes into the next generation of automotive technology in Canada, which we know is increasingly electric. I invite my honourable colleague to come on over and see the benefits of the growth of the EV technology over the longer term. It's something that is being recognized in his community. And it's part of a larger defense, I think, of the auto sector that involves also being very attentive to the concerns that have been raised. The honourable mentioned Ingersoll. The Minister of Industry has been present in Ingersoll, in Brampton, sitting down with the workers, being very, I think, direct and forceful with the companies that are threatening to not honour some of the commitments they've made to all Canadians, not just this side of the House, but all Canadians, including his constituents. And we think this is the appropriate approach to take, to be engaged with the workers, engaged with the Canadian sector that's here, and be very engaged with those who are deploying capital and showing them the value of deploying capital here, whether it's the American companies, American-based companies, or global companies. And again, this is all in the context of a budget that we think is an investment budget, but one that actually doesn't quite do what I think the honourable member is, concerned about fiscal policy. And I think he would know if he was looked more deeply into the charts in the budget, that this budget will, over a 3-year period, balance operating spending with revenues and make sure that those capital investments are the ones that we're borrowing funds to make. And he would also be aware that it's capital investments that are the pro-economic investments that unleash the kinds of opportunities for people in his riding as well as across the country. I think this government and this minister, the Minister of Industry, has been very attentive to the specific needs and concerns in Southern Ontario, and we're very active and involved in both securing investment as well as protecting the jobs that do exist there. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Elgin St. Thomas, London South.
I hear the words investment, investment, investment over and over. What I don't hear is the more honest framing of spending, spending, spending. If we want to get private sector investment in this country, and certainly in my region, we need the government to abandon the industrial carbon tax, to reduce costly and burdensome regulations. We need the government to admit that it has been killing jobs over the last 10 years by suffocating companies. We do not attract private sector investment by ballooning and bloating the size of government, which is precisely what this budget is going to do. They can try to use whatever tricky words they'd like, but at the end of the day, this is a budget that is going to put $320 billion in more debt over the next 5 years that future generations of Canadians are forced to bear. So why is there no path to genuinely balancing the budget, and why are we not able to see what Canadians are going to be getting for this money that is mortgaging the future generations?
Parliamentary Secretary, the Minister of Industry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the intervention by my colleague. And, I've been in the House now, this House, as he has been, just over 6 months, and I'm still waiting to hear for that positive action that the party opposite wants to take on fighting climate change. I haven't yet heard it. I've only heard the negative propositions. I think someone who's concerned about investment and investment trajectories and securing more private sector investment knows, and we on the Industry Committee of Parliament have been studying some of these questions, that it's very important to have policy certainty and policy predictability. And so to have an investment tax regime that's actually 4 percentage points lower than comparable rates in the United States on average, to have some policies in place that provide certainty around carbon pricing for industry, to have policies in place that show that we have EI supports, we have training supports, and that we have a series of investment tax credits that support that kind of investment, I think is the kind of investment and the kind of budgetary approach that Canadians are looking for.